Okay, the first thing we ask you is your name, when you were born, and where you were born.
My name is Josmarie Vanderspek. I'm born on the 18th of May 1930 in the Netherlands.
You really were growing up at a terrible time in the world, weren't you?
Yeah, not in the beginning, of course, but when the war broke out, it was very bad. Yes, scary for a 9-year-old.
It would have been. So you were 9 years old
when the war broke out, just a couple days short of 10.
When you were 10 years old, and you're probably not aware of much of what's happening, you're aware that there was a war with the Germans and the French at that time. Did you think it was ever going to come across into Holland?
No, we always thought the Dutch were neutral in World War I, and we always thought it would happen to. What we didn't count on were those, the NSB is Nationale Socialistische Beweging, National Socialistic Movement, that we had so many of them in Holland, sympathizers with the Nazis. Well, don't forget there was a recession or whatever you call that, at that time, especially in Germany, more than in our country. But we too had a lot of people that had no work and no money, and they believed what Hitler promised them. He did put them to work. You know where? In the war factories. They didn't get paid. They couldn't keep their houses and feed their families because they got paid peanuts for working in the war factories. That's all he did. He didn't do anything else in that country.
What were you doing? Just normal life, going to school, that kind of thing?
I was at the time. My dad went to Germany. He was a nurseryman, and he specialized in crossing fruit trees, and in Germany they were very advanced in that. So he went there in 1938 and came back and was very disturbed. He had seen a lot of killings and harassment of the Jewish people, and he went to our friends. We had a lot of Jewish people in Roermond, that's where I'm born. And he warned them to get out before it was too late. And those that did survived, and those that didn't, only one survived, a 12-year-old. Yes.
Oh my.
So, and then he said, I don't think the Netherlands is going to be neutral like it was in World War I. He felt that we should prepare. We studied the cellar. We had a huge wine cellar, and we studied it for bombs and other attacks, of course. And it was big enough for all the people in the street to join us. So we had an opening on the street side that we would open if the alarm went on in the wartime, and then they would all come in, and then we would close it and stud it. So.
Did you have instances where you used that?
Oh, yes. Oh, many times, many times. We used it all the time. When the first time that we used it was when the bridge was blown up. We were about a block and a half from the great big Maas River bridge. And it was very important because Roermond is right, it's from there you can go in any direction. It's a central city. And the bridge was very important because the Dutch were on the other side and the Germans were on our side in the town. So when that was blown up, it was important that the people that lived close by, because all the windows were shattered, of course, that they had a place to hide. So
that was good for so many people around you?
Yes, the whole street.
I was going to ask you, the town that you grew up in, where in the Netherlands is it?
It's in Limburg, the most southern loop of Limburg. Where it narrows, that's where Roermond is. the southern part of Limburg. We have Germany on one side, Belgium on the bottom, and on the left side.
My goodness.
Okay. About how far away from Germany was this?
About 35 minutes to the border. So we are very close. And the sad part was, in the wartime, I hate to admit that, we had a lot of traitors in our Nazi-oriented people in our town, and they betrayed the Dutch army and gave Dutch uniforms to the German army, and that's how they entered in our place.
And
Yeah.
you were aware of this when it was
We
happening?
weren't aware of it, no. Somebody asked for a password and they didn't know it, the Germans didn't know it, and then all hell broke loose. And within a half hour they were in our town.
They didn't have very far to go.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't. We were very close to Germany. So the bridge was already blown up, and we went upstairs and stood behind the windows. Well, the open windows, of course, they were broken. And we saw Big Bertha. You heard about Big Bertha, the cannon, came around the corner, and we saw it coming. And all the soldiers marching, the German steps, pounding the floor, and that's how they came in. And then they went to the bridge, and then the Dutch were on the other side, and it was a big bet. Then we went down in the cellar for safety,
You could hear the battles going on, couldn't
Oh
you?
yeah, oh you could hear it, oh yeah. It was enormous, scary.
It had to be, was it mostly women and children that were in the shelter, or did the men? go
Yeah,
in
all,
fight?
all families, men, women, children, At that point, our men weren't taken away yet, so they were still there.
You talked then about the men being taken away. Once the Germans came in, they took the men?
Well, not right away, in the beginning, it wasn't that bad. Pretty soon, we had a big house, 3 stories. And pretty soon they came and asked if they could have the 2 top floors. They didn't ask really, they just took. And so because they wanted to put printing the German money, and the printing was done on the 2nd floor. And we were only allowed to be on the 1st floor, where we also had our beds, and we slept in the dining and living room, and and the kitchen. That was all that we were allowed to have. And at night, we had 4 guards standing underneath the window. In the beginning, that would scare me, and I would get nightmares. And I would, run to my parents' bedroom and stay with them. But you get used to that too. You hear them stamping, you just hear them walking and talking. And they're there. But you get used to it, you just get used to it.
How did they
And
treat
we
you?
had 100 soldiers in our house. And they were nice. They were just ordinary young people, that didn't really want this war. They came and showed my mom pictures of their parents or their families or whatever. There was one lieutenant, and he was the biggest creep I've ever seen in my life. Scary as the dickens, because he could look right through you. He could literally look right through you. Even the soldiers were very scared of him. And he would come in our house on his horse and then tether it on the banister. That was it. The horse stood there all night inside. And he was a typical Nazi German. Typical. Very harsh and scary.
You were a little lucky that most of the rest were not threatening them.
No, and sadly enough, I find it sad, even though they were our enemy, when they were finally, we were then evacuated, maybe about 5-6 months later, we were evacuated out of our house. They had to have the whole house, It was very centrally located, so for them it was easy to have it. And we were put in an apartment in the middle of town. And those 100 people that went to war in Belgium, they fought the Battle of the Bulge, and they never came back. Not one of them survived it. So that I find that sad, you know, even though they were our enemies, because they were actually nice people. There wasn't one that threatened us or anything like that, you know. So not every German is a Nazi. You know, I lived in Minnesota next to German people, and they were absolutely fantastic. They're still my friends.
This is something because we've talked to American veterans that were at the Battle of the Bulge.
Mm-hmm.
And to see and hear the other side is good.
Yeah, I've listened to one in Minnesota, one American soldier that fought in the Battle of the Bulge, and he said sometimes we didn't even have bullets. I thought that was scary. That was really scary. I said, what did you fight for? Well, if it was quiet, we were okay, you know. Yeah, it's a bad war. It's a very bad war.
I'm going to go back to you were transferred to an apartment. Were there many of you? Was it your family or several families that were transferred?
Well, just my family because of the Germans wanting that house. They also had confiscated the whole building that we lived in. On the bottom was a candy store, chocolate candy, bakery stuff, and they took that for their supplies and what have you. So we had an entrance around the corner that we could go up in, and then, you know, we were on our own. But like in the beginning of the war, a couple months after we were occupied, all of Holland was occupied, the Germans allowed us to close our windows with boarding our windows and things like that, but we had to cut all the locks out of the doors so that they could come in at any time that they wanted to. So freedom was gone completely.
You had the regular army, which you're talking about
Yeah.
there. Were you aware of the SS, the Gestapo, the more hardcore Nazi units, and what kind of dealings did you have with them? And what kind of, did the army trust the SS, and did they work with the SS there?
Well, they had to work with them. They had no choice, you know. As I said, you know, the yellow shirts, we call them, the grüne Polizei, the green police. They were nasty people. They, you know, they're like the Nazis, and they were murderous people. They had no conscience about anything whatsoever, just none, you know. And those you were afraid of, absolutely, and you had to be. And one thing I have to say in favor of the German army, we never had to worry for them attacking us women or girls, you know, never. They were very disciplined, very disciplined. If they raped a girl, they got shot.
I have never heard that. That is amazing.
Yeah.
I was going to
Well,
ask.
we had 100 soldiers in our house. We never were afraid of them. And we didn't need to be afraid of them. That's what I want to, you know, I want to be honest about things, you know, and not just tear Germany down. But that was one good thing. They were a very disciplined army. And in total, in everything. You know, if they had to shoot you, they shot you, period. There was no question asked. But, you know, we didn't have to be afraid of them attacking us.
How did your father get involved with the underground?
He started it in Roermond, in our birthplace, because he knew that he had to organize a lot of people that didn't like what was happening, and you know, and to keep us together. That was the biggest thing. And fight while you could, you know. And that's what my story is about. how they rescued and warned people and rescued many Jewish people, rescued many pilots, American pilots, when they got involved in the war, English and American and Australian pilots, and then they had to be brought across the river, which was occupied by the Germans, but, you know, in the end of the war, in the end, like 44, the Americans were already on the other side of the bridge. And so we had to get them there. My father didn't do that because he couldn't swim. But he brought them all the way to the river. We had many, many pilots, and we kids, us kids, my two sisters and I, had to teach them to eat with knife and fork, because eating the American way was a dead giveaway if they had to go somewhere and eat somewhere else, you know, because sometimes the trip took longer. And I learned a lot of English, of course, from them, you know. And we had to teach them not to ever ask for ice. That's a dead giveaway. We don't eat ice in our water in the Netherlands. We just drink the water as it comes. So those things, that was our task, to do that, you know. It was kind of fun. Even we kids, we knew how we could lie and when to lie. You learn that very fast, you know, because when we had to carry messages to the other underground people, us kids, adults got, what do you call that, searched. Here's another word for it. Frisked, thank you. See, I lose my English every once in a while. Anyway, but we didn't. And so we carried messages, and my dad took us apart one day and he said, I've always taught you to be honest and not lie, and you have one chance only to set things straight, because that's the way you live. And now I'm going to tell you to always lie. When the Germans ask you where you're going and you have messages on you, you don't tell them that. You know, and it's pretty hard for a parent, but it's pretty hard for a kid to understand how all of a sudden do I have to lie, you know. But you do, and you learn fast. And you do it with your eyes wide open, and you don't look away, and you smile, and it's amazing. And when the war was over, my dad said, we're back to normal.
Do you have any idea how many pilots you were able to help? Americans?
We weren't allowed to know their names. That was too dangerous. And I regret that. That's one part of the war that I really regret, because not knowing that I would eventually come to America, I could have visited some of them, you know. I did a speech in Minnesota for the Jewish veterans, and one veteran came to me and he said, I probably dropped a few bombs on your town. I said, well, I'm glad you missed me. And I said, but you missed the bridge too, because then the Germans had built up the bridge again, and the Americans were supposed to drop bombs. And they dropped bombs and missed the bridge completely. We were mad. We were really mad. If we were on the roof, we could see where they were bombing. You know, we've done it. We've gone up on the roof to look at it, because it's and I can't tell you how many times I've seen German and English or American allied, I will call them, pilots shoot at each other, and you could see the shots actually going from plane to plane if the sky was clear. And very interesting. My grandfather stood on another bridge, the Ruhr Bridge, and he said, now I've seen everything.
What was the feeling that you had been overrun and the Germans were there? How did you accept that?
Well, you learn to accept it. You don't accept things right at the time. You just learn to live with it. You get kind of a lump in your stomach when things are happening, and you work with that. You know it's there. You know you're afraid, but you don't fight it, but you don't give in to it either. You know, that's how you become strong, actually. and deal with a lot of things later on in life. I have learned, from it.
You and your sisters, did you have friends that you were able to keep in contact with when you were there?
In town and around, but you didn't go very far from the house because of the bombing constantly, and we didn't have any food, of course, that was the biggest thing. But my father had gotten to know a lot of farmers around because of his business. And one time, one of the farmers came and he said, I couldn't bring them because the Germans are watching me, because they had to give all their food to the Germans first. And so he said, but I've got 2 piglets. If one of your kids can come and pick them up. So I lost one sister in the other place where we lived in the first place because of the no windows, and it was cold, May, it was still cold. So we lost her to pneumonia. Yeah, sad, 25 years old. And, but anyway, my then oldest sister, Francisca, said, I'll go. And she took her bike with 2 saddlebags and went to the farm, picked up the pigs, and about halfway home, there's an air raid. So she dug into a ditch, and at that time, one of the bags opened up, and the pig started to run away. She went after it, grabbed that pig, got it back in the bag, and she sat on that bag, wasn't about to let it go again, and came home with 2 piglets. Yeah, that was really fun. And we had meat. My mother could stretch that little pig for a long time, let me tell you. She was very clever in distributing the meat so that we would have it for a long time. Your freedom is completely gone. It's just, that is the hardest thing I think you have to deal with. You can't trust your neighbors. Now, when we were in that apartment, we didn't have the cellar because the Germans had the lower floor and the cellar. So we had to share our cellar, our being, with the cellar next door to us, the people next door. And at a certain time, we had to be in the cellar so many times that we decided to put bunk beds in, and so we all slept next to each other. And we were in that cellar for 2 years. On and off. You could only seldom go out and maybe take a quick bath with a bucket of water, not a shower or, full bath. The Germans controlled the water, everything. Then my dad said, I think it's a good idea if we try to connect all the cellars from the whole street. So, the whole street. It's too bad I have pictures of it. You could see it. So they dug out a hole like this in the walls. Mind you, in Europe, everything is stone. It's not, like the houses are built here. So we went all the way on our side of the street to the end, then dug under the street. That was later. And then the other people on the other side did the same thing. So there was a better way of escaping when we got the raids, the German raids, which were there all the time and unexpectedly. But the underground, especially in '44, when America was involved and so many pilots got shot down, to have that system, that was fantastic because that would help a lot, The Germans caught on to it and then raided the street on both sides, which was not so good. You couldn't trust your neighbors. One of our neighbors, so we were in the cellar next to our house, next to our apartment. And then the next cellar was a single woman. She had no money. Her husband had died. She had no money, she had no income, she had no way of, it was an older woman, not old, maybe 50-ish. And she had an affair with a German officer. He kept her alive. And after the war, all those traitors got tarred and feathered. Did you ever hear about that? they got tarred and feathered, let me tell you, I've seen it. And we cheered. We were 15 years old. Whoa, yes, you know, that was the thing to do. Of course, you learn later on that it's kind of a bad thing. But she never betrayed us. She always warned us when he was going to be there. We think he actually knew what we were doing. And for him, it was a safe haven to be in. It was a two-way street, I think, you know. But she never betrayed us. And my dad went to bat for her because when they were rounding up those people that had associated with Germans, they rounded her up too. And my father interfered and said, no, she doesn't deserve that. She has never betrayed us, and she just wanted to stay alive. And so she got off the hook. So then in 1944, my father was betrayed by one of the people on down the street, so our street and then one down. And we had helped those people in the beginning of the war with food and everything, and yet they betrayed my father. So he was sent to a work camp, first in our town, and then later on in Bergen-Belsen in the northern part of, right next to the northern part of the Netherlands in Germany. It wasn't a concentration camp, so we were lucky there. And to make a long story short, he was helped by the German people around the camp to escape in 1940, the end of 1944. So that was wonderful. We were already evacuated at that time up to the northern part of the Netherlands, Friesland and Groningen, the two most northern states, provinces we call them, but states. Completely out of town because the Americans were already on the other side of the bridge, of that bridge that was blown up. And the Germans wanted to booby-trap the entire town, which they did. Thank God that somebody that had taken our radio from your friends, you know, from the underground, had warned the American soldiers on the other side of the bridge that that was being done by the Germans. So, and I don't think one house exploded. So, you know, that was kind of a good thing. But when we were evacuated to Friesland, my father was taken out of the camp by the German people, we were warned that he was coming. And, but he couldn't come right away, you know, because he was in Groningen. When we were evacuated, we went into cattle cars, cattle trains, you know, and we had to go into Germany. It took 3 days and 2 nights to go because we couldn't go straight up to the northern provinces because Nijmegen and Arnhem had already been taken by the Allies. So we had to go all the way into Germany, and then up we saw Berlin burning when it was bombed by the Allies. But as we were on the train, still in the southern part of Germany, we were attacked by American allies. They didn't know we were in it. They saw the train, they bombed it. So we were all hoarded out of the train, of course, under guard. And when we came back, my older sister, the one that got the piglets, wasn't there. And we weren't allowed to go and find her. We had to leave her behind. So what we didn't know was that she was put on the next train and ended up in Groningen. So that's right next to the German border. When my father was freed by the Germans, they got in touch with the Dutch Red Cross and they brought him to Groningen. He found my sister. And then he brought her, after the war was over completely, he finally came to Friesland, where we were evacuated, my mother and my other sister and I, and came there, and we were reunited, all of us. And my brother was in Amsterdam. He studied medicine, so he just lived there. We hadn't had contact with him for over 4 years. So 5 years, actually. So that was an unbelievable moment of the end of the war, and then them coming back, finding both of them. It was unbelievable for us.
You must have grown up a lot in 4 years or 5
Yes,
years.
you do. No school, but my parents made us, we had all our books. The schools had given us all our books, so my parents made us study every day. And I was only 6 months behind. Even though we hadn't had school for 3 years, I was only 6 months that I had to catch up on. So that was wonderful.
How old were you when the war ended?
15, a couple days short of 15. So a couple days short of 10 and a couple days short of 15. So May 5th, the war ended. I have to tell you something that I found also very sad. I saw the Germans retreat. They were all old people. I'm not kidding. The young people were all somewhere else fighting or dead. And the way and it was midnight, and we are standing behind the window, and we're seeing the road was a little higher, and we see all these, they pushed the cars and whatever equipment they had. They didn't have any motors to ride in anymore. And so they pushed these things, and I've never seen, like this. They were bent down. You could see the defeat in their bodies. The body language told us how defeated they felt. We found it very sad because we were all watching it. And then next day, of course, the American soldiers came. Oh no, we had Canadians up in the northern part of the Netherlands. And they came, and of course that was joy, Oh, and then the Red Cross got involved, and they all took us back to the south in one day. It's not that long a distance if you can go straight. And when we came there, we had American occupation. We had Patton. We loved Patton. We really did. We wished that they had allowed him to shoot right through to the Russian border. There would have been a much better situation than it ended up with the Iron Curtain and all that, Yeah, he was a fantastic soldier. We liked him. We didn't like Montgomery. He was a wimp. Are you going to edit that out?
I don't think we should.
No, you're not the first person who has said these things.
He was a wimp. Yeah, and he stopped Patton from doing what he was good at, There were a lot of people that thought he was a little too harsh to his soldiers. Hey, listen, it's not easy to lead a couple thousand or 100,000, I don't know how many he had, people into war. They had to fight. And so we admired him very much.
You're not the first person to say that about Patton. The soldiers that we've talked to who were in Patton's army almost completely loved it.
Yeah.
But
he gets criticized for that one time that he, slapped a soldier or he slapped.
It was just like a fly.
Swatting a fly.
He slapped him, he swatted him. And he probably deserved it, let's face it, My dad was an officer in the First World War, and he said it's not easy to keep guys under control. you know. We had a lot of destruction. My school was completely destroyed. But no, not like, I mean, that was a deliberate bombing, and it just was flattened. It was the worst thing that they could have. Same with the dikes. They were so useless and senseless to do that, you know. We just got, we didn't have any direct bombs in our area, because I think the pilots were pretty darn good, except for missing the bridge. I will never forget that. But they had to go in, I was told later on, if this is the river and here is the bridge, and they had to drop the bombs like this in the river, cross the bridge. You know, it's a shot, one in 1,000 that they could miss that, you know. But they did. And, but that's where, you know, we didn't get bombed by anyone, just grenades and things like that. That's what we had a lot of damage from, you know.
Going back to the period after the war, you talked about the lack of food during the war, and then the Red Cross got involved later. What did the Red Cross do for the civilians after the war, and how long did that last? Did you have?
Well, they just did transportation for the people. They help with sick people, which we weren't, you know. We were skinny as the dickens, but we weren't sick. And, but you know, immediately people started to get get their house in order, help each other. It didn't take, Rotterdam, for instance, was bombed completely when Hitler, well, he was upset about something that had happened, and so he bombed Rotterdam. And within 2 years, it was rebuilt. We don't take very much. We get together and we work together and help each other out. And the dikes were rebuilt, and, you know, people get busy. They don't sit and wait for the government to take care of them, which I don't like.
The reason I asked that question, and I'll fill you in just a little bit, I'm glad you brought up Rotterdam, because my mother was growing up in Iowa during the war. She was a young girl, probably 6, 8 years old, I think, for the most part. Mm-hmm. And her family ended up through, I don't know if it was Red Cross or some other organization, supporting a Dutch family from Rotterdam who had lost their home, lost their livelihood. And they were sending food and sending clothing and sending materials after the war to this family, and they became pen pals with the young girl who was about my mother's age, and they still are in contact all these years later. They've been to the United States and visited us. I've been there. My mother's been there to visit their home. And I was wondering if there was ever any kind of a connection between somebody in the United States and your family, or if you knew of other people who had that kind of...
I had a pen pal. Patty Huben was her name. And she lived in, I've looked for her for 10 years, and I've never found her. She lived in, I can't remember, I'm sorry, in South Dakota. Oh, why can't I remember the name? Anyway, I have gone on the internet, I've gone, I thought it was going to be easy because her dad had 2 theaters. I went into search and searched and searched, and I've never been, because she probably got married, and I've never been able to find her. But she would send me chocolates, my favorite, and I'm an absolute chocolate-holic. And she would send me stockings, nylons, 1 in each envelope. So I would get 1 stocking 1 week, and the next stocking came the next week. Unfortunately, I have always regretted that I've not been able to find her, because I would have gone to visit her, you know, but it didn't happen. So I finally gave up. But there were many families in America that took care of families in Holland.
Have you been able to talk to other people that went through the war and what their experiences were?
Yes, I have met people here in America that came from Europe, Norway and Denmark. Sweden, of course, was on the German side, so we didn't associate with them for a while. For a while, we forgave them later, but yeah, they had similar experiences.
When did you come to America?
In 1962. I lived in Indonesia for 5 years, and I lived in Australia for 5.5 years. And the clinic that I worked for, that I managed the X-ray unit of the heart and lung clinic in Sydney. And they sent me back because my company, a company in Holland, Philips, had just come out with new technique about X-rays, and they said, you know, you speak the language, go for it. So I met my husband. So I didn't go back. I stayed in Holland, and then we decided in 61, we got married in 61, and we decided we wanted to, because he wanted to be a neurosurgeon, and they were very small in the Netherlands. I think there were only 12 there at the time, and he couldn't get in. You just had to have a lot of wheelbarrows, if you know what I'm talking about. And so his professor said, go to America, go to Mayo Clinic, and we did. So he did become a neurosurgeon in the Mayo Clinic. I always wanted to be a nurse, but I couldn't stand the sight of blood. Even though I've seen the first heart surgery, open heart surgery. Anyway, I didn't have money to pay for my education. My brother wanted to be a doctor, and in the old families, the men, the women, the boys, men came first. You know, they have to make a living. We could get married and we didn't need it. But, so there was no money for me to go to medical school. So I decided to learn languages and to learn medical language, because I thought then I can always get a job in a hospital, maybe administration or something. That's what I aimed for, and that's what I've done. People are people, wherever you go. You know, when I lived in Indonesia, before Sukarno came in and took over, those people were the most wonderful people, inner wonderful people that I've ever met. And they weren't radicals or anything. Now Indonesia is the biggest Islamic radical country in the world. And it's all because Sukarno. I was on a square in a rickshaw at one point, and Sukarno came, 4 tanks came and closed off the 4 corners of the square. And Sukarno came on a tank, standing upright, and he started to talk. And and with a microphone, he started to yell, "Kita musti kerja," you have to work. That was his motto. And everybody was on the floor, bowing. Everyone. I sat there in the rickshaw, sticking out over everybody. I thought, this is not good. But that's how Hitler also turned everybody into Nazis. It is amazing that one man, I cannot understand it till today, that one man can turn an entire country upside down like that. It happened there, and it happened in Indonesia. You know, and when he became president, I lived next door to the palace, and I thought it was time to leave, you know, because it was dangerous. It was dangerous for white people to live in Indonesia. Sukarno gave the Indonesian people, that were originally all Dutch people, a choice that if they wanted to keep their Dutch nationality, they had to leave. and he just kicked them all out. That's why we have a lot of Indonesian people in the Netherlands right now. And we get along fine, you know. Yeah, it's amazing how one person can so intimidate an entire country. I can't figure that out. I've never been one for idolizing Hollywood people either. You know, to me they're, well, I will refrain from what I'm thinking. I don't care for them. But, you know, I've never been one for falling on the floor for anyone, because we're all people, just normal, ordinary people. But it is amazing how one person can turn it around. I found it very sad that America didn't get involved sooner. There is a book that I recommend very highly to read. It's Erik Larson, In the Garden of the Beasts. That's the title of the book. They're not talking about Tiergarten is the street in Berlin where all the Nazis lived and where they had their meetings and everything. It's not a zoo they're talking about. It's about those Nazis. They call them Tiergarten. Anyway, Professor Dodd from the university, a professor of the University of Chicago, was sent to Germany as an ambassador in 1933. Yes, 1933, I have to think. And he warned Roosevelt in 1938 what Hitler was doing in Germany with the Jewish people, how he treated them. And even non-Jewish people, you didn't like the Nazis, you got shot. There was no question asked. And he warned them, and Roosevelt said, just get our loans back and all we are interested, we don't want to get involved in the Jewish situation. Had they been involved in that, that war would never have happened. I'm convinced of it. I am convinced of it. It's not history, but, you know, it's kind of sad.
Very sad.
Yeah. I still like America, though. We didn't go back till my husband actually finished his neurosurgical time in the Mayo Clinic. And so in 1970 was the first time that we went back. And we had 2 children by that time. And then we went back every year around Christmas because, you know, we celebrate Christmas a little different than we do here. And every year and later on, a little bit later, every other year, we went back. My last time in the Netherlands was when I took my son Paul and showed him all the places that I have lived and what had happened, and gave him a little history tour. I was going to take him to Normandy too, but it was so expensive, I couldn't afford it. $800 from Amsterdam to Normandy in the train. Euros. And the euro was 4-1 at the time we were there. Yeah.
Are you happy he has seen all of this now and will remember?
I'm sorry?
Your son, you're glad that he saw
Yeah,
it,
yeah. He is. He's very happy that I'm doing the presentations, and you know, I did 157 in Minnesota. Unfortunately, I hate to say that for Colorado, but I've only done 8 in 2.5 years. The schools don't. I have gone, mind you, in Minnesota, I never advertised myself. It went all word of mouth. They called me. I didn't call anyone. Here, I didn't get. I had one in the Immaculate Church, the Roman Catholic Church, and then I got one referral from that, and that was it. And I thought, gee, I got to do something here, you know. I want the people to know what happened. And I have a bio and also a little bit information of what I do and what I've done. And I took that to every school in Lafayette, Westminster, I have to make the rounds, Broomfield, Louisville. I did one speech in the library in Louisville, and Longmont and Thornton, all around. Churches and schools, and no response whatsoever. None. But I did 157 in Minnesota, made tons of money because everybody paid and paid well. 100. I think the lowest I've ever had was 100. So, and I donated all of it to the, in Minnesota to the National Guard and here to the veterans. There's a high school in Minnesota, in New Brighton, that I've done 10 presentations. And when he heard I was coming back, he said, "You're booked for the spring." No questions asked.
We're doing interviews like this now with people 60, 70 years after the war. Did your parents ever talk about this? Did they ever write anything down? Did they ever describe what they did during the war?
I took notes. I had a shoebox full of little informations. And I would speak just from the heart with groups, medical groups and friends groups, and not organized, and I didn't do it for anything but just the information. And then when I moved to Minnesota in '88, a friend across the street said, "You should put that together and make it into an orderly story," because it was haphazard. Like this is actually a little haphazard too. But put it into a story, and I did. I put all those notes together and put it on the computer and printed it out, and now I just read it as I do, and I do my presentations because I don't ask money for it, but if they have a budget, I accept it, and then I donate it to the veterans. I've never taken 1 single cent from anything I've gotten. So both in Minnesota and here. Unfortunately, I haven't done many here. I have a copy, I made a disc for my grandchildren, actually. And then I had a friend in Washington, D.C., a Jewish couple that I knew, and they were in Washington, D.C., and they were very involved in the Holocaust Museum. And they were staying with me for a while, and I let them listen to my presentation, my tape. And he said, "I would like to have a copy." I said, "No, I just want to have it for my grandchildren so that they won't forget." And he said, "But I really want one because I want to put it in the Holocaust Museum." And he did. I gave him a copy, and he put it in the Holocaust Museum. Teachers come and listen to it for learning purposes. But, my son is planning on taping and videotaping my entire speech. And then he said, "You should send that to the Holocaust Museum because then you're on it." So that's what he's planning. There's not much in the history books about World War II here, which I find very sad.
It is very sad.
Yeah, because the kids need to know what can happen. It can happen again.